So today with me here, I have Minister Jason Copping, who is a Minister of Labour and Immigration for Alberta and the MLA for Calgary Varsity. First of all, thank you very much for joining us today, and I'd like to welcome you to Radio Sursangam.
Thanks so much for having me, Sapreet. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So today we're going to be talking about the critical worker benefit, which is a one-time payment of $1,200, which approximately 380,000 individuals will qualify for. So Mr. Copping, if you could sort of set the stage here by telling us a little bit more about this program, so the details, including which sectors qualify, what the thresholds are, and the procedure to which individuals can apply for this.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Sapreet. And you laid out that sort of the high-level overview of the program in your opening remarks. You know, this was pleased to announce this program with Premier Kenney last week in Edmonton in a grocery store. And really, it's the purpose of the critical worker benefit is to provide a one-time payment of $1,200, and this will be paid to approximately 380,000 eligible public and private sector workers who supported Albertans during the pandemic. So the total amount allocated to this is $465 million, almost $500 million, of which it's both federal and provincial dollars, and the provincial government of Alberta has contributed $118 million. And really this one-time payment is a recognition of the hard work and the continued efforts that these workers have made to support Albertans during the pandemic and these very difficult times. Now, in terms of eligibility, you know, we wish everyone could be eligible. As you know, there are essential services have been operating throughout the pandemic, but that includes roughly 80% of the working population. And sadly, even though $500 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but it's not enough to recognize everyone. So we fully appreciate the tremendous work that all Albertans have done through the pandemic. However, we wanted to focus on particular critical areas and to recognize these workers for going above and beyond, who are particularly impacted by the pandemic. And so on the public sector, these include workers in healthcare, social services, and some education. And then in the private sector, it includes those workers who really have been supporting our food manufacturing and food retail and transportation supply chains, medicine as well, and health clinics. And don't get me wrong, we recognize the tremendous work that everyone has done through this pandemic, but we really wanted to focus on these particular workers. And we set up this program to recognize them with a one-time $1,200 payment. Now this is this payment is focused on, and this is partly a requirement of the federal program, that it needs to be, you need to pick a 16-week period. So the period that we chose is really the second wave. That's the second wave that happened in the fall and over Christmas was much higher than our first wave. So we chose that period so that it's mid-October to the end of January. And we also made a one-time, because it's a one-time lump sum payment, we wanted to make it easier to administer and recognize those who are coming to work. So we set a 300-hour threshold. So if you work 300 hours over that 16-week period, you'll be eligible for the $1,200 payment. We recognize some people work far more than 300 hours, and others who work half-time. And if you're working half-time based on a 37.5-hour week, you will make that 300-hour threshold. They'll be eligible for that too, and to get the payment. And in terms of the administration of it, we recognize there's lots of questions about this, because when we're talking about potentially 380,000 workers that could be eligible, well, who are those workers? So we've announced the sectors, but we're providing more detail in a website, which is going live late this afternoon. It may be up already. And I want to mention it now, and I'll come back to the end, but I think it's really important. So if people have questions, they can go to alberta.ca /critical worker benefit, or if they can email questions to cwb@gov.ab.ca, or call at area code 780-310-4455, and they can get questions on that. But again, the intent behind this program is to thank critical workers who have stepped up to the plate, who responded to the pandemic in these critical sectors. and to thank them for that. And not only are we saying thank you to them, this also provides money into the economy and to support all Albertans generally, because we get more money into the economy, people spending money, and the ability to create jobs through these very challenging and difficult times.
That's great. Thank you so much for that information. So I do have a few follow-up questions. I did receive a lot of phone calls the past few days from our listeners asking for more clarity. So I'm going to highlight the main questions I've been getting, or the common themes I've been hearing. So I think the most of the questions are coming from the private sector individuals. So I think at the moment they're sort of lacking directions, and with applications going live tomorrow, I think they need more clarity on the application process. So my understanding is for private sector, the employer is responsible for applying on their behalf. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you're correct, Sapreet. For quasi-public or public sector employees who are eligible, we already have arrangements between the government of Alberta and a number of these organizations. So for them, those employers do not have to apply on behalf of their employees. We'll work with them directly, and then the payments can go out. And on our website, we'll provide more details in regards to what occupations are eligible. For private sector employers and employees working in the sectors who are eligible, we don't have agreements with them, right? So it is an application process. So this will be on the website. And what we're asking to do is employers to apply and provide a basic set of information about the number of employees who they think is eligible, and some information on that. We will review that to make sure they're eligible, and then we will make give them a grant to the employer. But part of the deal is the employer is required, because this is not wages. This is employers distributing money on behalf of the government to their employees. And one of the reasons why we chose this mechanism of delivery is because we were trying to find a way that would keep the costs low, so we can have more money we can distribute to employees. Plus, we wanted to get it out the door fairly quickly, and having an individual apply, like employees apply to the government, you'd have to put up a very large infrastructure to be able to handle that, and then there's costs associated with that. So we wanted to minimize that, and we felt the best way to do that is going through employers. And the steps are laid out on the website in terms of the application process and all the policies. And if employers have any questions, they can get the same email and phone number that I mentioned earlier, and I'll come back to the end of the call. I'll just make sure we repeat it again. They can come to that. And then also, if employees believe that, geez, I think I'm eligible, but my employer doesn't seem to be moving on this, what we would ask them to do is to talk to their employers to say, I think we're eligible, can you please verify? And then failing that, they can call the office that we set up for this, and then we can actually get the information out to their employer to say, look, based on the information we have, we understand you're eligible, and you can apply through this process. But really, our approach is trying to get to say thank you to the workers, and get the money in the hands of employees in the most efficient manner possible, and limit the costs associated with that as well.
Okay, so just to clarify, if there's a circumstance that an individual believes they are eligible, but the employer doesn't apply for them, there is an onus on the employer that they need to submit the application.
Yeah, so it's not a requirement, but quite frankly, we strongly believe that employers will apply on behalf of their employees, because this is a benefit for their employees who are doing work at their work site. It's not wages. It's a benefit from the government, but we will ensure that they have the knowledge to be able to do this. The process is not onerous. Providing information, we will check it, then enter into an agreement with the employer in terms of flow of the money, and then there will be an audit after to make sure that the employers have flowed the money to employees. And we will also, those who apply, we will post their names on the website, so the employees know that, oh, my employer has applied, that's great, and then we can move forward. And it'll take some time to deliver this, because not only is there an application process, but then you have to go on payroll cycles, so it'll be a number of weeks to do this. But as soon as the person has applied and been approved, we'll post the employer's name on the worksite, so employees will know, okay, my employer has applied, and I can expect that in the coming weeks.
Okay. Thank you. The next question I have is for those workers who were working during the time frame, so between October 12th and January 31st, and they were working either part-time or full-time, but say during this time period, they actually contracted COVID-19. So they were positives or they had to isolate for those 14 days, and they no longer meet the eligibility of the 300 hours, but they were working during those time period. So if we take the 14 days into consideration, we're looking at about 80 hours taken off from the 300 hours. Would there be any consideration for that, or would it strictly be that they have to meet the 300 hours?
Yeah, and I appreciate there's all kinds of questions like this, right? In
Right.
terms of as soon as you set a level, there's going to be people who fall on one side of it, the other side of it, and some of the circumstances are within their control, and some of them aren't. And I recognize that, and I thank everyone, even those who don't work the 300 hours, and just because they've been scheduled 10 hours a week, and that's just how it happens. We needed to set some rules about how we were going to apply this. And we fully appreciate that there's going to be people on both sides of that line. So, from our perspective is, we looked at, well, what's a reasonable amount halftime? People are working more than that. And generally speaking, a lot of people are working like full-time. So even if in the instance case, they're working full-time, they're out for 2 weeks, they would still make the 300. And we were considering that in terms of what level do we set that? Because we're also, in terms of developing the program, on a quote unquote hourly basis, if you just make 300 hours, $1,200 is quite a month, quite amount on an hourly basis. Whereas if you're working the full time, which was more than double that, 600 hours or more for those working overtime, then it's less on an hourly basis. So we wanted to make it simple as possible, but we do appreciate that you're going to have some people who will fall out of the category, and which is unfortunate, but that's why we set it quite low at halftime, to be able to try to recognize that. We also have made some allowances because we do recognize, so for example, in the education sector, that there were some requirements by the Chief Medical Officer of Health that schools were closed down. Right. So people couldn't work. So what we were doing in those cases is making it in recognition that the school was closed down by the Chief Medical Officer of Health, that we're prorating those hours. So instead of 300 hours over 16 weeks, let's say you're closed down for 4 weeks, we'll prorate that. So over and take out, the equivalent of 4 weeks to be able to allow them to work. So we have done that recognition, but I appreciate, there's going to be hundreds of scenarios where you're going to result in this, and we need to draw the line, but we did that in making it quite a bit lower, so it's not just people working full-time hours. No, we're going to drop this down to try to take into account as much of that. But no matter where you draw the line, you're going to have 1 or 2 people on that, and this doesn't mean that we're not thanking them for the work that they do, but we need to draw that, because at the end of the day, as I said, $500 million, it sounds like a lot of money, which it is. This is a tremendously big program. But in terms of applying it across the board, we need to focus on what we're thinking critical workers, and what we think, quite frankly, not only they working on the front lines and providing key service to Albertans, but also as many Albertans would recognize that, look at, our healthcare workers, like for example, the nurses, the LPNs, people who are doing the testing, they need to be recognized. And we made different choices. You look at other provinces, for example, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where they didn't choose these healthcare professionals and made different choices in terms of how the application is. But we felt as a government that these workers on the front line in healthcare, for example, and in the caring sectors, social services dealing with people with disabilities, long-term care facilities, we needed to recognize them, and so we made choices on how to do that and try to get it, a simple program to the most amount of people that we could, given the dollar amounts that are available.
Great. And actually, the next question I have is relating to one of the points you made out regarding the school system and how there were sort of a reduction in hours there. So I read online that bus drivers would qualify for this benefit, but there has been limited service, especially for school bus services. So with these individuals, these drivers, is there going to be any allowance adjustment, or basically would they just be generally categorized with all other types of drivers that are eligible?
Yeah. So bus drivers' education will be, because they're in the education sector and the schools are closed down for a period of time, will prorate the 300 hours to be able to do that. Now, you will still find some who are part-time who may just fall just below that and others above that. And we thank them nonetheless. But again, we needed to put some clear criteria in that. And but we made allowances recognizing that that was that particular sector was closed down for a period of time. And so we made changes to the minimum threshold of that.
Great. And just one final question, if that's okay. So on our social media, we actually got a lot of discussion and criticism these past few days about how it seems unfair to some individuals. That being said, I do understand this is focused towards critical workers who were working during these times. So a lot of the discussion is that it's unfair because the individuals that retain their employment during these distressing times are the ones who are going to be the recipients of the $1,200 payment. So is there any preliminary discussions towards incenting other individuals who either lost their jobs or had to significantly reduce their working hours due to the pandemic?
Yeah, so we appreciate that there's a significant amount of unemployment caused by this. So we're not only dealing with the pandemic and impact on just general retail, for example, and people and hospitality, where people were laid off because of restrictions, but also we're dealing with a worldwide recession and the impact of another shock in energy prices that we had last spring, caused by the worldwide recession. So all of these factors, and we appreciate that. There are a number of programs that were put in place. Some provincial programs like the emergency isolation benefit, which was a very short bridge program, to the federal program, the CERB 2, and now the EI version of that, to be able to help those people who were impacted in terms of losing their jobs. And so there are a whole suite of services there, and we're going to be doing some more work as a government as part of our lives and livelihood program and our economic recovery program, in terms of how do we take people who are unemployed, and this is, as Minister of Labor, it's something that's near and dear to my heart, retraining, so get them back into jobs in the workforce. So there is a suite of benefits and that for those individuals. This program, and it was established by the federal government, was really targeted on those who were continuing to work during the pandemic. That's what this program is about. And it's targeted primarily at low-wage workers. So, in the private sector, we define that as $25 an hour and lower. But we made one exception in health, like nurses and allied health workers. And really the purpose of this program is to recognize the workers who continued to work. And don't get me wrong, we fully appreciate those who have lost their jobs, and there's programs in place in there. And then we're looking at very hard about how do we get Albertans back to work. But this is just recognizing those who continue to do the work and say, we want to recognize that. Thank you for that. And we can't thank everyone with a $1,200 payment, but we thank everyone generally. But for critical workers in these sectors, particularly healthcare. But one of the reasons why we announced this as a grocery store is because you have cashiers there who are making well under $25 an hour, and stock clerks who continue to stock the shelves through the pandemic. We were talking about those working in long-term care facilities, which are lots of newcomers are working in the long-term care facilities and doing tremendous work day in, day out. They need recognition, and it's not just those who are providing direct care, but those are going to work and making the food and cleaning the janitorial staff. These are recognition. So I appreciate the comments saying that I wish we could recognize everyone, and I understand that. There's only a limited amount of funds. And the purpose of this program is to recognize those who came to work despite these challenges, and look at particularly those in healthcare with the second wave and the increase in workload, particularly in some of our acute care hospitals with the rise in COVID, an increase in ICU beds, which thankfully we're on the other side of the curve. But the tremendous amount of work, and we just need to recognize that and quite frankly say thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing all the information today. Honestly, I think that helped clarify a lot of information, and I will let all our listeners know about the website once it's up and running and how they can access that. If I could just get you to repeat that email and phone number one more time, that would be excellent.
Thank you, Sapreet. I'm glad you remembered. I would have forgotten, even though I said this at the outset. So the website is alberta.ca /critical worker benefit, all one word.
Great.
Phone number is 310-4455. And the email is cwb@gov.ab.ca.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking out time here today and speaking to all of us.
Thanks so much for having me, and have a great evening.
You as well. Thank you.